Alright, so I'm in my floor plan view for underside of steel deck. And I'm going to place a roof. And it's just going to be roof by footprint, like we saw from the start, just the kind of basic way of doing a roof. But the difference is that it's going to have, instead of all the layers being flat, I'm going to have just one layer that I can manipulate and have kind of a variable thickness to. So I'll click on roof, and I'm just going to use the boundary line tool, and I can just use rectangle, just keep it really simple. And what I'm going to do for now, at least, is I'm just going to click on the intersection points for the structural grid. And I want to go from A1 to C2. It's a flat roof, of course, so I don't want to have slope on any of these edges. So once you've generated that rectangle, activate your modify tool here, your selector, grab all four of those lines, and then make sure that you turn the checkbox off here so that none of them define slope. Once you've done that, just click in the empty space here again. And what you'll see here, is probably just something that says like generic 400 millimeters or something like that. Okay, ultimately what we want to do is we want to create a new type of roof. And I'll initially just show you what it looks like, and then we'll kind of backtrack a bit and make one of our own. If I click on Edit Type here, what this roof type shows is that I've got a substrate, just kind of like an exterior gypsum or a plywood down below, and then I'm representing 200 millimeters of insulation, and then on top, this little thin layer represents the roof membrane. Also in here, what you can't see, there would be an air vapor barrier between this bottom substrate layer and then the insulation. So if I click on my edit button here for my structure, it'll show me all those layers here. So the way this was constructed is I had a core boundary on the bottom, and then that layer number 5 represents the gray layer here, which is the exterior gypsum or the plywood. And then I've indicated the membrane layer, which is the air vapor barrier. It doesn't have any depth. And then above that I have a core boundary. We haven't really talked about these much, but I'll explain why that's important here. Above that, I'm going to have the insulation represented as 200 millimeters. And the crucial thing is I have to have this box checked. Okay? When I check this box, it means it's going to allow me to manipulate the depth of that top layer. And then above that, I just throw on the roofing EPDM material, which is my roof membrane layer up top, and I just gave that a really minimal kind of 2 millimeter thickness. Okay, I'll click on that, and we'll go through kind of doing a custom build on that. So I'll duplicate. This one will be, say, number 2 in my case because I've already got one, but yours just call it sloped insulation 2, or sorry, without the 2. And then, hang on a second, let me backtrack a bit. I'll just use a generic so it looks the same. I will click on generic roof 300, click edit type, duplicate, and I'll call this one sloped 2, and I'll click edit, and I'm going to insert an additional layer here. I'm going to make sure I keep the core boundary at the bottom. This layer here, my structure as it's called, I'm just going to set that to 15. That represents that bottom layer of gypsum or plywood. I'm going to drop the core boundary down. This layer that says 300 at the moment, I'm going to set that to 200. I'm going to change it from structure to thermal air layer. And then I'm going to add another layer here. Whoops, that one should be below. Just remember you can use these up-down buttons to get the placement right. That one should be this is the one I want to move down. This one is my membrane layer. It doesn't have any depth, of course. And then I've got my core boundary, my thermal air layer, which is my insulation, and then I'm going to insert another one above that. And this is also going to become a thermal air layer with a thickness of just 2 millimeters. Okay, and now if I zoom in here, I'll see representation of all those layers. It doesn't really look like what's described here on the right, and that's because, of course, the membrane layer doesn't have any depth to it at all. So I also haven't assigned any materials here yet. So just to kind of run through that, this layer here, I can assign in the material browser here. See if I've got a gypsum layer. I'll just make it that. Again, just kind of rely on whatever it is Paul describes as what this material would be made out of for your class. And I'll click OK. So you can see that material updates. And then I'll move to the insulation layer. I'll choose material, and I should be able to track down just a rigid insulation. There we go. I'll click that. Also happens to have a kind of gridded hatch pattern. And then on the top for material, there is a roofing EPDM membrane. I'll click OK. Happens to have a white finish to it, so I get a nice little bit of reflection. And when that's done, again, make sure the crucial thing here is that with that layer number 2, the thermal air layer, rigid insulation 200 millimeter, I have to have this box checked for variable. Okay, and then when I click OK, I've got my roof all ready to go here. So I make sure that's selected in my properties window. Remember, I'm still in sketch mode here. I'm still generating the this roof panel. And it's all done now. It's in the right place. And I've got the right type selected. So I click on the green check mark. And that finishes up. And I'll go to my 3D view. And I just have to make sure my roof objects are visible. You wouldn't see that step. That just shows what I had done on this file beforehand, but don't worry about that. You will see your roof panel when you click for 3D view after you've finished sketching. So now what I've got, I actually forgot one element here. So here's my roof panel. Remember, as I drew on the board there, I'm going to have kind of a set of crossing lines, and in the middle of that intersection point, that's where my drain would be. So to mimic that, I'm going to go back to my floor plan view. I've got the roof selected, and there's a tool over here on this Modify Roof tab that appears when I select a roof element. Over here on the right in the Shape Editing panel, I've got a little button here called Add Split Line. And you can even watch the little video to see what it's all about. And you just generate the 2 lines, and that indicates basically the valleys for your draining. And then once they cross, it'll automatically create a 5th point in the middle, and that's the point that is going to represent the low spot of this roof panel. And we'll adjust the outer perimeter points and raise them up to get our tapered insulation. So I'm going to click there, and then using the snaps, I'm just going to set some crossing lines. When I finish making this click, you'll notice that it makes an additional point in the middle. And now I can just click on Modify Sub-Elements and hover over the perimeter points and change them from 0 to 200. You'll know you have the point selected if you see the numbers appear. So look for that. Okay, and then just use your Modify tool and select out here. And that's now complete. And there we have our roof panel. Okay, and if you want to just confirm that you've actually got that slope, you should be able to see it as you rotate around a 3D view. But as we've done before, we can also use our section view. So I'm just going to drag this little section view out and adjust its range. And if I put it just right there in the middle, I'll see that when I click on this section view that I've got a nice kind of V-shaped profile for this roof. And there it is. So it comes to its low point right over the beam. Now the last thing we want to do is actually drag this point off to one side or the other, because what this represents is where we would actually have a pipe. So we'd have a little kind of trap with a filter on it, and then that would lead into a pipe, and that pipe would drop down through the building and actually drain the water from the roof. So we can't have it colliding with the structure. So we'll just go back to underside of steel deck, and I'll click on that. I'll click on the roof panel, and then with Modify Sub-Elements, I'm going to click on that point, and I'll use the Move tool and just pull it out, say 200 millimeters. Okay, and then I'll just go back to a 3D view, and that all checks out. And that's how I do my sloped insulation.